Lassie Farm here. This will be a short story from this book I bought on eBay. Modern American Short Stories. I think it's published in 1945. And this is a short story that originally appeared in the New Yorker magazine in 1943, it says. Pigeons on Casserole. From the first, I felt uncomfortable. I thought it was the unpleasant news I must break pleasantly to her, but then I am always so nervous now. To live in New York, to earn a living from its neurotic, unstable women, that is work for a Tantalus, for a refugee, a man who has literally nothing but his manners and a little talent. Petite to petite. It is more disgusting than a concentration camp. There, I think, one's honor sustains one, come what may. But to be always at bay like a cunning animal, a little animal, in a jungle of devouring women, that she could never understand. I telephoned her. I detest writing letters. To say I would meet the boy at the Grand Central Station and bring him on the first train to her in the country. It was his summer holiday. Her voice over the telephone was so warm, so gay and fresh. "How kind of you," she said. "How very wonderful of you." It was always like that whenever I called her up, most of the time to say I could not come to see her, sometimes for months on end. I was unable to come, and always she answered in that fresh, happy voice, "Yes, darling, I understand." When we finally got to her station on one of those villainous local trains, there she was, running towards us, her face aflame with such joy that it was, in a way, terrible to see. The boy stood slightly to the rear of me, as if he were afraid of it, almost. Yet any mother would stare at a son who left a little boy and returned after 8 months, a head taller and the bony structure of a man's head already changing the baby face. I too had stared when I first saw him. "Mon petit," she exclaimed. "Comme tu as grandi." In her excitement at seeing him, she had forgotten he had begged her never to speak anything but English to him, especially in public. People passing us looked around curiously, hearing the foreign sounds, and Kurt frowned. To remind him of anything that makes him different from an American boy is a great pain to him. When he did not step forward to embrace her, she turned toward me, nonplussed. It is something to handle an adolescent boy. The primitives do that very well. Take him away from the women, and when he returns from the ordeals and the rites, he is a man, and there's an end to all this oppressive mother love. I took her on one arm and Kurt on the other. A boy has enough to contend with in his own self, and I marched them along fast to the house down at the other end of the village street. The village had had some charm in the early spring with its white painted fences and houses and blossoming trees, but that day, when we walked up the street, there was so much green everywhere, such rank growth. Lilac and honeysuckle both past their period of flowering, and the sky partly overcast, so there was neither sunlight nor sharp shadow. In the corners of her little yard around the house, the weeds were knee-high. Having lent us a farmer cottage, you would think my client's generosity would extend to sending a gardener twice a year to keep the weeds down. But no. However, once inside the house, it was really most astonishing how pleasant Eugenie had managed to make that shabby little room with bouquets of grasses, wild flowers, and whatnot. She ran and lit the kerosene lamps. Then she turned to us, smiling now, for she could see Kurt's stiffness softening out of his face. As his mother helped him off with his top coat, he could, without loss of the precious dignity of an adolescent, quite naturally embrace her. Ah, that was much better. She became her old self. "Go upstairs with the bags," she said, "although I should send them up somehow, for you are my guests, especially this first day when you are not to lift a finger." She called after us, again the woman whose endless courage gave one the strength to go on. In all the years there had never been a word of complaint from her, even in that frightful year when we finally reached New York with the streets of without money, without friends or acquaintances. For months I walked the streets of New York without success, and always she would go welcome me back to that miserable little hole of a room in which we all three lived with such grace of spirit that I could go on. The only things I really knew were how to run a car and fly an airplane. I answered every advertisement, went to every kind of garage in New York, Brooklyn, across the river, in New Jersey, anywhere, but to no effect. Everywhere gruffness and terror. Nah. Then, God, it's really fantastic. This country, an amateur, a patron of artists at home, unable to earn a living at Motors, which I knew even in my dreams, I became an interior decorator. And to whom do I owe this belief in me, this beginning of a whole new life? I, a monarchist and a black of Vienna, to a Jew. The ignominy, the humiliation. Yes, only from Jews in New York, from their organizations, did I get help. A Jew lent me the money. Lent, did I say? Pressed it into my hand. The check for $2,000. "You," he stuttered, "that you should go begging for work. It must never be." You see, in his mind was still fresh the memory of that old Vienna he had left as a poor ghetto boy. "A count," he said. "It's simple. You must become a Park Avenue decorator." And we'll leave it there for now. Pigeons on Casserole. I thought it was going to be like about cooking pigeons, but anyways, thanks for watching. Stay tuned.